Going on school trips costs a lot, especially if you go to a private school. You're probably not used to these expenses since you went to public school. It might be too much for you to pay for it. But don't worry, I'll get you a souvenir. The teacher in charge of my daughter's class is really straightforward, but sometimes he sounds like he's talking down to her. No one should talk down to or ignore others, especially not a teacher to a student. I'm Natalie. My brother and I were left without parents when we were young because they died in a bad car crash. I was only 8, and my brother was 15. After our parents died, our relatives had to figure out what to do with us. We didn't have many family members, and no one had enough money to take care of both of us. They said, "We can't handle both of them because we're struggling to raise even one." They already had 2 kids of their own, so having twice as many was out of the question. We realized that all we had left in life was each other. I was just a 3rd grader, clinging tightly to my brother. I cried constantly, and he felt helpless seeing me go through so much. At 15, he was barely an adult, and I was still a child. He could only do so much to help. After a while, one relative agreed to take me in. "Sorry, but we can't take both of you," they said. "We thought one of you could stay with us, and the other could go to a foster home or shelter." I understood the situation, but I knew being separated would make things even harder. "Please take care of her. I'll go to the foster home," my brother insisted, sacrificing for me. "I'll be okay. Just because I'm in foster care doesn't mean I won't be looked after," he assured me, holding my hand tightly. He made me feel like I deserved it, like he wanted this for me. As he held my hand, I couldn't help but cry and beg him to stay. The family that took me in didn't seem too thrilled, and I always felt like a stranger in their home, like there was a divide between us. I felt so alone. The shelter where my brother stayed was really far away. It was tough being apart, but we kept in touch by phone whenever we could. Even though I was with my relatives, my brother was my only real family. Without him, I started feeling more and more alone. I've always been sensitive and creative. I love expressing myself and letting my imagination run wild. As I felt lonelier, my emotions got stronger, and I started withdrawing into myself. Through middle and high school, that feeling of loneliness stuck with me. I began pouring my feelings onto paper, crafting imaginative stories that flowed naturally from my mind. When I shared some of my writing with my brother, he praised it and urged me to keep going. He said, "This is something special." After graduating, I dove into job hunting. With my passion for reading, I landed a job at a small publishing company that focused on literary magazines. If it had been a bigger company, I might not have applied. Not because I wasn't qualified, but because it wouldn't have felt right for me. I put everything I have into my writing. It's kind of an obsession for me. I wanted to show my gratitude to the family who took me in and reassure my brother that I'm doing fine. Starting my first job was tough, and I made my fair share of mistakes, but I kept pushing myself, and before I knew it, 5 years had flown by. At the time, I was working in the editorial department, assisting one of the top writers. This writer had real talent and even won an award for his work. As his editor, I did my best to help him whenever he hit a roadblock. I shared my creative insights and gave feedback to help him improve. When my boss praised me saying, "Natalie, I don't know what I'd do without your creative mind," it felt incredible. We had a strong bond in our working relationship. And then he surprised me by saying, "Natalie, you're not just the perfect partner at work, but in life too. Will you marry me?" I was totally caught off guard by his proposal. It was unexpected, especially since we hadn't openly dated or been romantically involved. But considering how close we were from working together, we knew a lot about each other. So I said, "Yes, I want to spend forever with you." And it just felt right. My brother was thrilled about our wedding. We hadn't spent much time together since we lived apart, so I couldn't wait to see him again. My husband understood how important it was for me to reconnect with my brother, and he was looking forward to meeting him too. My husband told me about his involvement with the shelter and the kids there. He didn't just contribute financially, he was actively mentoring and supporting the children. "There's one kid in particular who really stands out," he said. "He's driven and hardworking, and he even calls me Big Bro." He was glowing with pride, and I couldn't help but feel proud of him too. 2 years into our marriage, we were getting ready to welcome a new addition to our family. My husband's writing was gaining recognition, and he credited it to my advice and support. "Thank you for always believing in me. I love you," he'd say, making me feel so appreciated. Our daughter, Nicole, was born, and our lives were filled with joy and excitement. She was bursting with energy, and we were over the moon. One day, as I looked in the mirror, I realized that the loneliness and sadness I once felt had vanished. I smiled at my reflection, feeling grateful for everything I had overcome. Nicole blossomed into a kind and bright child. Before we knew it, my husband and I decided to enroll her in a private school. We found one that focused on nurturing independent and creative thinkers, offering a well-rounded education in academics, athletics, and the arts. Nicole thrived in that environment. Our careers were going well too. But when Nicole started 4th grade, we received devastating news about my husband. He was diagnosed with terminal cancer, and it had already spread too far for treatment by the time we found out. We went to the hospital together, but I returned home alone. I stayed by his side, praying for a miracle, but it wasn't meant to be. I was scared that the loneliness I once felt would return, but this time I had Nicole. I had to stay strong for her. I changed my mindset and focused on moving forward. Nicole and I leaned on each other for support as we faced life without my husband. Every moment became more precious, and I vowed to cherish every second. As Nicole started her final year of elementary school, she was nervous about meeting new classmates and teachers, but she knew she could handle it by the time. As the first semester ended, I noticed Nicole became increasingly quiet about school, especially after spring break. Starting the second semester of 5th grade, she seemed even more distant. My worry grew. Was she not enjoying school? Was she being bullied? But as the second semester neared its end, nothing changed. Today, I had to confront her. I couldn't ignore it any longer. "Hi, I'm Nicole, and I'm in 5th grade. Last year, my dad passed away, and it was really tough for me and my mom. But my uncle helped us through it, and I'm grateful my mom was able to heal. I was excited to start 5th grade, even though I knew I have a new teacher and classmates, except for one friend from last year. Our teacher is 28 and has been teaching for 6 years. He kind of gives off an older, annoying brother vibe. Our teacher wanted to get to know us better, so he had us fill out a get-to-know-me worksheet. Then he planned to interview us individually based on our answers. When it was finally my turn, he said, 'Your favorite subject is English, right?' I love reading too. But then he mentioned my dad's passing and my mom raising me alone, and I didn't like his tone. 'Just wondering, what does your mom do for work?' My mom works as a contract employee at a publishing company. After my dad passed away, she switched from full-time to contract work for the flexibility. I told her she didn't have to, but she prefers it. It's kind of like working part-time. How do you guys afford the school? You must be having a tough time." It felt like my teacher assumed we were barely getting by. It didn't seem sincere. Then he made more comments about our finances, like he pitied us, like we were pathetic. His attitude during that conversation really bothered me, so I tried to avoid him afterward. But he kept approaching me, usually when I was alone, and would say things like, "Struggling with money is stressful, right? Is your mom still working part-time? Can you afford next semester's tuition?" I tried to brush it off and be mature about it. Once, I even argued back, saying we weren't poor, but he didn't stop. So I decided it was best to keep my distance. He laughs and thinks it's because he's right. I decided to stop talking to my mom about school altogether because I didn't want to involve her. I could tell she was getting worried about me. Then, over spring break, my teacher assigned us a book to read, a popular novel by an author named Kiri. the main character had a tough childhood but eventually succeeded in life. After class, my teacher approached me when I was alone. "That book starts with a rough childhood, which a bit hits close to home for you," he said. "But let's be real, life isn't like a fairy tale. People from poor backgrounds usually stay that way. It's a cycle, you know?" He laughed and sarcastically apologized for making me read it. I felt so alone and powerless. I couldn't believe he was my teacher. I dreaded going back to school after spring break. I wanted to change my attitude to stop worrying my mom, but my teacher kept picking on me. I couldn't understand why he enjoyed taunting me. I tried ignoring him, but one day I couldn't take it anymore and snapped back. He was speechless at first, then angry. As he walked away, he muttered, "You're a feisty one, aren't you? I'll remember this." That's when I realized I should have just ignored him. At the end of the school year, there's this big 5th grade field trip everyone's excited about, even though it's not happening yet. People in class started buzzing about it, and once again, the teacher singled me out. "Those school trips are pricey, especially compared to public schools. Wonder if you'll have to sell the house to afford it," he said with a smirk. "I'm looking forward to it, but hey, don't sweat it if you can't make it. It's a luxury, and you've got more important things to worry about. Better to stay home." He even hinted it would be better for the school if I didn't go, like payback for snapping at him. Then there was this incident where a classmate's Nintendo Switch went missing. The teacher insinuated that kids from poor families might have stolen it out of jealousy, looking straight at me. My friend started asking questions, but I kept quiet to avoid his smart remarks. Later, when we were discussing middle school plans, the teacher suggested I reconsider staying at the private school. He doubted my mom could afford it and suggested we look into public school instead. He kept belittling us, saying it's stupid to stretch beyond our means. I couldn't take it anymore. I stormed out of the conference, tears streaming down my face. I was so frustrated with him. When I got home, my mom sat me down and asked what was really going on, so I told her everything. I was speechless hearing my daughter's words. I couldn't believe she'd been dealing with harassment at school, especially from her teacher. She didn't want me to worry, so she kept it all inside. I hugged her tight, apologizing for not knowing. I knew I had to talk to the teacher right away. I decided to record our conversation on my phone, just in case. "I assumed you'd be working hard, just like I am." His response confirmed my daughter's story. I demanded to know why he felt entitled to speak so horribly to Nicole. It was my duty as a parent to make her aware, even though it should be his job as a teacher, a responsibility he seemed to overlook. He had the audacity to suggest we send Nicole to public school if we were struggling financially, but he was wrong. We've never faced financial instability in our lives. His assumptions about our situation were unfounded. He kept interrupting and talking over me, making it impossible for us to have a civil conversation. His immature remarks pushed me to my limit. I warned him sternly, "That's enough. Don't ever speak to my daughter like that again, or there will be consequences." With that, I stormed out, leaving him speechless. After our confrontation, Nicole said he stopped bothering her altogether. I was surprised she let it go so easily, but thankfully, she made it through to graduation unscathed. Unfortunately, I couldn't make it to the parent-teacher conference afterward. Nicole confidently chose to attend the same middle school as her friends, despite the teacher's mocking laughter. "I'm here with my sister for my niece's graduation," Joseph said, suddenly realizing that Nicole was his niece, and then recognizing me as his sister. It was time for me to set the record straight. My late husband was a renowned writer, and we still receive royalties from his work. We're financially secure because of that. Plus, I have my own steady income. He was stunned. The author Kiri, whose work inspired you and whom you admired, is actually me. It's a pseudonym I used. You can imagine the royalties from that alone. My husband and I enjoyed collaborating, but I also wanted to pursue my own writing. After his passing, I shifted to a more flexible job to focus on my writing full-time. I poured my heart into my writing, and as I continued, I improved. I could have stopped working altogether, but I enjoy the company and value the routine. That's how I finally completed my book. Joseph saw parallels between his upbringing and the author's story, but instead of overcoming his past, he projected his resentments onto others, including my daughter. He wrongly assumed my family was struggling and belittled us. Such behavior is unacceptable, especially from a teacher. He's not fit for the role. He didn't respond and instead broke down in tears in front of everyone. My brother reported him to the principal, leading to Joseph's swift termination. I provided the principal with recorded evidence of my confrontation with Joseph, which left my brother speechless upon hearing. He expressed disappointment in Joseph's true character and doubted Joseph's ability to continue teaching with such behavior. I realized I had misjudged him. Don't worry, people like him are rare, otherwise the world would be doomed. I hope I never become like that. My brother chuckled at Joseph's behavior. You should focus on your own happiness now. I'm content, and you don't need to worry about me. Maybe it's time for you to start dating. What about you? You could date and be even happier. As long as you're happy, I'm happy. But a new dad? My daughter is wise beyond her years. She's my happiness. Why do we feel so alone? Is it in our minds, or do we close ourselves off from seeing the beauty around us? The answer lies within our hearts.
Waking up to the presence of an ignoramus in the morning was akin to inhaling poison that would linger throughout my workday. Each sunrise brought with it the burden of enduring the condescension of an elite chief, a product of some lofty institution of higher learning. On a particular day, my tolerance reached its breaking point. Perhaps you should escalate your grievances to our superiors, she taunted. After all, I belong to the cream of society. Nobody will heed the complaints of a dropout like you. Her smugness was palpable, but a single encounter with the passing company president swiftly altered her demeanor. Good day, I'm Daniel Smith, he introduced himself. I landed a sales position at this company's branch straight out of high school. My father's motorcycle accident left him incapacitated, rendering him unable to provide for our family. So I opted to forgo college and joined the workforce to support them, thanks to a referral from my father. The camaraderie among the employees at this company made each workday a delight. My boss is kind, and my coworkers are a breeze to work with, so work-related stress rarely crosses my mind. Yet today, I can't shake off this feeling of melancholy. Smith, isn't your meeting today with the head office? A colleague inquired. Yeah, it is. Seriously, that means they'll be here, right? I should have taken the day off. You don't interact with them directly, so just keep it to yourself. I'm already feeling down this morning. Before my colleague could continue, they abruptly changed the topic. Why was nobody at the entrance to greet me? I was expected, and this is how they welcome me, they grumbled. Forget it, let's just get to work, they muttered, then hurried away. Remember that backstabber? A disgruntled voice, now left with me, seethed. This place is full of ingrates. It's infuriating that I have to bend over backward just to communicate with them. I sincerely apologize. I didn't anticipate your early arrival. She's Manager Jones, frequently commuting from headquarters for meetings and such. With a degree from a prestigious university, she was recruited as a seasoned executive candidate. Unfortunately, her demeanor often veered into arrogance, belittling employees at the subsidiaries. They're all just typical uneducated incompetents, she'd sneer, making me look like a fool. Let's just get this over with. Could you kindly wait a bit longer for another key person to join us? They're en route. What? You expect me to wait? My role is to hit the ground running upon arrival from headquarters. This incompetence is beyond belief. I deeply apologize. You're here 20 minutes ahead of schedule, yet you're being unreasonable. I yearned to retort, but the person on the other end was from the head office, an elite recognized by headquarters. I hesitated, unsure of the repercussions if I dared to challenge her authority. We grumble amongst ourselves at the subsidiary, but when it comes down to it, we never confront them, always enduring silently. As I carried on with my usual routine, driving to work one morning, I noticed an elderly lady in distress crouched in the middle of the road. It was clearly an emergency, but those around me either avoided involvement or didn't know how to react, feigning ignorance as they passed her by. Are you all right, ma'am? I rushed to her side, but she couldn't respond. Her breathing was labored, and she struggled to speak. I'm calling an ambulance right away, I announced, swiftly dialing 911. Once the ambulance arrived, we all accompanied the elderly lady to the hospital. It's all right for you to head home, the nurse reassured us. We'll take care of her until her family arrives. Having already informed the company of my tardiness and concern for the grandmother's well-being, I opted to stay until her family showed up. Thankfully, her condition wasn't critical, and she was discharged after a few days. We breathed a collective sigh of relief. Then, a few weeks later, out of the blue, I received a transfer order to the headquarters branch office, a directive straight from the president. Contemplating the move, a colleague offered their perspective. It's a testament to your hard work being recognized. Embrace it and give it your all. Encouraged by their words, I resolved to accept the transfer. My first day at headquarters proved to be quite the whirlwind. Deciding to greet each department individually, I encountered the chief in the corridor and hastened to offer my greetings, but she caught sight of me and shot me a disdainful glance. What brings you here? Aren't you a bit out of your element? Good morning, Chief. I've been reassigned here. Oh, you're being relocated. What on earth are they thinking? Disregarding my greeting, the chief launched into a tirade. Starting my day by sharing airspace with an uneducated imbecile is a surefire way to ruin my entire workday. I apologize if I've inconvenienced you, Chief. Please spare me the pleasantries. Just steer clear of me. I'm busy. Don't get in my way. Clearly in a foul mood, the chief dismissed me with a wave of her hand, as if shooing away bothersome insects. It was evident that any further attempt at conversation would be futile, so I resigned myself to returning to my duties. As I returned to the floor where the chief was, I overheard her berating her subordinate. You're incompetent. How can you mess up something so simple? Even a new recruit could handle this. I apologize, colleague. The employee, visibly distraught over her mistake, clenched her fists, lowered her head, and endured the scolding. If this is how it's going to be, I'd rather have someone else working for me than you. You're no longer of any use to me. Clear out your desk and get out of my sight. With those cutting words, she turned to face me, our eyes meeting. Already discontented, her expression soared further as she glared at me. Didn't I tell you to stay away from me this morning? Please, Chief, hear me out. I have something to discuss with you today. Enough. Everyone here is arrogant. I don't have time for incompetent fools like you. With those words, the chief stormed out of the room, slamming the door with all her might. Concerned, I approached the employee who had just faced the chief's wrath, wincing at the resounding crash of the door. Is this typical of the chief's behavior? I inquired. According to the employee, it wasn't just typical, it was a daily occurrence. She's always disrespecting me, he lamented. Worried that the chief might overhear, he hushed me, cautioning, Shh, she might hear you. Aware of the potential consequences if the chief caught wind of his complaints, I did my best to soothe his frustration. I've endured this for too long, he confided, shuffling to his desk and retrieving a white envelope from a drawer. Please don't tell me that's a resignation letter, I implored. Unfortunately, that's exactly what it was, he confirmed, something he'd been contemplating for some time. At my previous workplace, every day was serene and fulfilling. But ever since the chief arrived, it's turned into a nightmare, he lamented, tracing the surface of his desk with a heavy sigh. The clutter of documents and notes bespoke his dedication to his job, despite the upheaval. I understand your frustration. It's disheartening to see your hard work undermined by just one person, the chief. I sympathize. You've poured your heart into this job, longer than she's been here, and you've excelled. But his frustration hung palpably in the air, with no outlet in sight. The chief might say otherwise, but there are surely colleagues who trust and rely on you. Stay a bit longer for their sake. I'll help shoulder the burden. You're not the one who should walk away, I encouraged. What do you mean? He queried, his curiosity piqued as I made my way to confront the chief, leaving him pondering behind. We can't allow any more employees to be mistreated like him. That's why I'm here, I declared, trailing after the chief until I found her in the break room, sipping tea. Mind if I join you? I inquired. The chief glanced up, her expression pained. You're still here. You're as persistent as a fly. I'm just trying to take a break. Please give me some space, she sighed wearily, likely drained from the recent confrontation. Summoning my courage, I addressed her firmly. Chief, I'll be conducting a thorough investigation into your treatment of our employees. Depending on the findings, appropriate actions will be taken. My direct statement caught the chief off guard. What are you implying? Are you trying to play the hero to shield incompetence? No, that's not my intention. Why don't you go run to your superiors with this? I'm an elite, you know. I have the backing of those above. Nobody will pay heed to a dropout like you from the subsidiary, she retorted dismissively, waving her hand as if to brush off the matter. Suddenly, a man emerged from the other side. Smith, there you are. How's everything going? It was the president. I'm doing my best, thanks to your support. Ah, hello, Mr. President. What a pleasant surprise to see you here. What happened to the grumpy chief from earlier? She's putting on a facade of excellence for those higher up the chain. I'm glad to hear you're thriving. Have you connected with the new branch manager? Huh? What new branch manager? The chief looked puzzled, her gaze unfocused. He's standing right in front of you. Hadn't you been briefed? The president chuckled. This inept employee from a subsidiary company. You're quite the comedian, boss, the chief scoffed, joining in the laughter. The president, however, regarded her with suspicion. What are you talking about? Are you suggesting I'm joking? Understand this. He's now the brand manager of this branch office. It's impolite to label him incompetent, the president admonished. What on earth? The chief shot me a scowl. You didn't bother to inform me earlier, did you? I've already informed the rest of the department. Oh dear, such a rude and ill-informed individual. The chief's face flushed with anger, and she looked on the verge of collapse. Observing the situation with reluctance, the president finally spoke up. Let me shed some light on this remarkable opportunity. This company belonged to his father. Due to a car accident injury, his father couldn't manage it, so I took over. Is he the former president's son? The chief inquired. That's correct. I've been urging him to relocate to headquarters, but he's quite adamant about staying put, the president explained. I apologize. I have a fondness for that place, and I found it satisfying, I replied. What prompted your unexpected arrival here? Why didn't you just continue at the subsidiary? The chief interjected, momentarily forgetting the president's presence as she directed her query at me. The president, accustomed to seeing the chief in a more composed state, was visibly taken aback, his eyes widening in surprise. I made a heartfelt plea to him. He's my mother's savior, her benefactor, I clarified. What about the president's mother? The chief pressed further. Yes, the elderly lady I rescued a few weeks ago happened to be the president's mother. When he arrived at the hospital entrance and found me waiting for her family, I was surprised. I later learned that he was the one who had immediately come to her aid, calling for an ambulance while others ignored her. I felt he deserved better than being relegated to a subsidiary. So, you personally appointed him as branch manager, the president confirmed. That's correct, he nodded. I had my doubts about my qualifications when I was first appointed as branch manager, I admitted. Coming from a subsidiary, it was a sudden shift to leading at the head office. But after hearing from the president and receiving a call from my father urging me to support the company he had built, I made up my mind. That's precisely why I've appointed him as branch manager. Moving forward, I expect you to show him the respect he deserves and heed his directives, the president admonished the chief sternly before exiting the room. That's the explanation, chief, I reiterated as I faced her once more. You've been mistreating not only your subordinates but also those under your direct supervision. I understand the frustration and pain of being belittled simply because of lacking formal education. No. The chief collapsed into her chair, tears streaming down her face as her pride took a severe blow. It was no small shock for her to suddenly find herself outranked by someone she had long looked down upon for their perceived lack of education. She even threatened to have me dismissed. With that, my ordeal came to an end. The following day, a comprehensive investigation into the chief's conduct was conducted. Numerous employees and subordinates came forward with accounts of her egregious behavior. As a result, disciplinary action was taken. Upon receiving the news, the chief left the company without a word, her spirits seemingly drained. The chief appeared visibly distraught. Considering her high self-esteem, it was understandable. By the way, are you certain you want me to replace the chief? I inquired. I have full confidence in you, the president affirmed. With the chief dismissed, he appointed the individual who had previously endured her wrath. This employee had a long tenure with the company and showed unwavering dedication to their work. Naturally, I had thoroughly vetted his past performance, knowing he had first-hand experience of the frustrations and mistreatment under former Chief Jones. I knew he wouldn't repeat the same mistakes and would prove to be a compassionate leader who understands his employees' feelings, I explained. As for myself, I endeavored to approach my role from the perspective of the employees, not solely as a branch manager. Drawing from my positive experiences with a subsidiary I had previously worked with, I conducted regular interviews with staff, seeking their input. I also organized training sessions for employees in leadership roles, striving to foster a more supportive environment. Through these efforts, the company's culture gradually improved, resembling the positive atmosphere of the subsidiary where I began my career. Will Smith, I apologize for what happened with Jones, but thanks to your efforts, this company is thriving, the president acknowledged. Oh, I'm apprehensive, I admitted. At a later meeting, I found myself summoned to the president's office for a casual coffee chat. He wanted to discuss the recent developments in the workplace. I'm not getting any younger, eventually. I envision Will stepping into my role, the president shared. With all respect, Mr. President, I don't see myself as presidential material, I responded. Why not? Your father would have wanted the same, he countered. I aspire to remain aligned with the employees, working alongside them to support the company and engage with our customers. Once in the president's seat, that connection may become strained, I explained. The president frowned at my words before abruptly excusing himself. You have a unique sense of humor. Most would leap at the opportunity, he remarked upon his departure. Am I considered eccentric? I wondered aloud. No, it's refreshing. It's exactly the kind of mindset we need in a Smith, he assured, giving my shoulder a firm tap. You have a meeting coming up, don't you?